This lesson is going to talk about neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity means that our brain and our neurons are not static, that they do grow and they can change over time. So let's talk a little bit about the history of neuroplasticity. William James was the first person to actually use the term neuroplasticity, and he related that to changes in the nerve pathways that form when we establish habits. So the more often that we do something, that establishes a neural pathway for that habit. Eugenio Tanzi first identified the articulations between neurons, the synapses, as possible sites of plasticity. So what does that mean? Go back to anatomy and physiology and remember the neuron and the synapse. So that's what he's talking about, is that at that actual synapse, there's plasticity, that you get growth and new connections at the synapse. And then Ernesto Lugaro was the first that linked actually neuroplasticity with the synaptic plasticity. So Tanzi kind of identified it, and Lugaro actually said, yes, this is what's happening. Santiago Ramon y Cajal also had the word plasticity. He used that early on. And he had a quote, a saying that he said, "Nerve pathways are something fixed, ended, and immutable. It is for the science of the future to change, if possible, this harsh decree." So people had always thought that the nerve pathways were fixed. You had the nerve, it got destroyed, it didn't grow back. But this isn't true. And what he's telling us is that we have to, in order to think differently, we have to realize that they're not fixed, that they can in fact change. So things that we used to believe in terms of how we thought and how neural pathways worked was that areas of the brain were hardwired for function and circuits. So when you have kind of like your house and you have all the electrical that goes throughout the house in certain orders and certain places, but that's not necessarily true with the brain. We also thought that if you had a stroke, that the function associated with that area was lost forever. We now know through different types of rehabilitation exercises that you can regain function in some of the areas that were lost due to stroke. Brain pathology like obsessive compulsive disorder and depression were untreatable except to manage symptoms. But through meditation and some conditioning, you can alleviate some of those symptoms. I like this one. Happiness had a set point. Well, not necessarily, because we can get joy and rethink how we want to do things, and that can make us happier. No neurons were made once the brain was set. All you could do was lose them. And that's not true either. We're growing neurons and new connections all the time. There are endless possibilities. We now know that it's possible to add neurons and connections to our brain throughout our life. So it doesn't end at any certain age. Throughout life, once you're born until the time you die, you can be adding neurons and making new connections. It's constantly changing, and each experience that we have, that you have, changes the brain, changes the connections that you make. New behaviors, new learning, new environments. Physical injuries also stimulate the brain to create new neural pathways or reorganize existing ones. So what does that mean for learning? You're coming into a new program, very excited, a new environment, well, clinicals will be a new environment for you. So we're not meeting on campus, but you'll be in your home, but the online learning community will be a new environment for you. And so the more that you log in, sign in, it will become habit, and it will create new pathways in your brain so that it becomes easier and easier for you to do those things. There was actually a study done in the year 2000. They looked at some London taxi drivers' brains, and the taxi drivers needed 2 years of training to learn how to navigate all the streets in London in order to earn their license. So MRIs were used to look at their brain before and after that 2-year period. And the taxi drivers were found to have a larger hippocampus, which is a part of the brain that is involved in memory and navigation, than a control group of healthy men. So because they were using their brains and going down certain roads and certain streets a certain way so many times, their brain had grown because of that new information. Let's define a couple terms. So neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to change its structure and its function. So it also, it changes itself. The brain itself changes with the neurons, and then the function changes as well as you learn to do new things. Neurogenesis, neuro being nerves, neurons, genesis being birth, is the production, creation of new neurons. And then synaptic genesis would be the formation of synapses between the neurons. And that occurs, as we said earlier, throughout the lifespan. So this little picture here is titled Neural Reorganization, and it shows you collateral sprouting. So that makes up for lost contacts. So the green neuron no longer has a connection with the other green neuron. So the red neuron or pink neuron has actually developed collateral circulation to keep that going. I think that's amazing. So brain activity. The more activity, the more active, the more things you do, that promotes how your brain is reorganized. So regular brain workouts help the brain to organize those connections more quickly. So the more that you read and the more that you're studying and the more that you do things repeatedly and then move and do something else that's new, then your brain gets a workout and you get more connections and they form more quickly. So if you think about, we're looking at principles of rehabilitation, like we were talking about the person who had a stroke, when they are doing rehabilitation, the physical therapist, occupational therapist, maybe even sometimes the respiratory care practitioner, respiratory therapist are working with them to stimulate movement, to get them to move, to get them to breathe, and to prevent the muscle wasting. And it's repetitive actions and exercise that help this to happen. And what that also does, the repetition and the brain workouts, stimulates the inactive neurons, the ones that aren't really working all that much, to promote self-repair and reorganization by doing a specific motor activity. So they had, there was a study in Germany where they had 7 patients who had lost the ability to walk, and they were placed on a treadmill, right? You're gonna walk on the treadmill, and they had a harness type system and support so they wouldn't fall down, and the treadmill forced their legs to move, right? Because you're gonna walk on the treadmill, and eventually their brains form new connections, allowing 3 of the 7 patients to walk independently and 3, what's 6, to walk with supervision. But none of them could walk prior to that. So that's just amazing. I've also worked with teenagers, adolescents with spinal cord injuries and seen this happen, where their movement, their ability to do things has increased due to repetitive exercises, neural stimulation, things like that. It's just amazing. And evidence suggests that the brain structure and function are malleable, meaning that you can move them and change them throughout life, especially in memory and learning. So depending on the sensory input that we have and what we're doing, our brain can grow. We can have new pathways. We can learn, understand, do new things, which is what we're getting ready to do. One of the ways to strengthen and rerouting connections is to practice, is to do things, like we just said, to train your brain. So while you're here in the Nursing and Allied Health program, we're going to challenge you, not in a bad way, in a good way. We're going to raise the bar to have you rewire your brain and the way you think. So you're going to learn new skills, assessments, interventions. You will have perceptions that you've brought into the program with you, and maybe those perceptions will change as you move through the program. We're going to also work with new communication methods. We have to communicate with our peers, with other nurses, with doctors. We have to communicate with patients. We have to communicate with each other, with our peers, the instructors. You have to communicate sometimes with people that don't speak the same language that you speak, or are in a different mood than you are, have different backgrounds than you do. And so we are going to facilitate your learning of these new skills and communication methods, and then also help to facilitate you learning about how to answer multiple choice and critical thinking type questions, right? Because that's what you're being tested on. And when you take your board exam, that's what you're going to be tested on. So we have several different ways of helping you to understand how to look at the question, figure out what the question is asking you, and then be able to choose the correct answer. So when you look at neuroplasticity, there's a mental activity, a feeling, a thought, and then neurons fire and you get a new connection. And then you repeat that activity and it strengthens that neural connection. So that's hopefully that will help you in your learning. What are some other ways that you can increase your neuroplasticity? This information comes from Second Wind Movement, and it shows several things that you can do to begin to increase your neuroplasticity. Now that you know it exists, that your pathways can change, how do you make that happen? What are some things that you can do to make that happen? So one of the first things is to find clarity. And that means what are your goals? What are you really wanting to accomplish? What are you hoping to get from nursing school, from respiratory practitioner school, the classes? Where do you want to go? How much time are you wanting to put in, and the work and the effort are you willing to put in? What clarity do you need for that? You need to set meaningful goals, so goals that are important to you. And once you reach that goal, you need to set new goals, because then that will provide new opportunities for you to make new connections and grow your neural pathways. You also want to take baby steps. They call it micro steps. I call it baby steps. That's mostly because I'm a neonatal nurse. And so you want little steps. So oftentimes students will come in and they'll say, oh, I've been a straight A student in high school or in college prior to coming to Hartnell. And that's wonderful. But now you're in healthcare and you're learning new things in a whole different way than you've ever learned anything before. And so your goal initially might be, well, I want to get A's in every single course that I take, which is an admirable goal. And some students, that does happen. However, if you take baby steps, you may look and say, well, I think I'm going to try and get an A in my NRN 46 or my first RCP lab or something like that. Or maybe it comes down to, I'm going to get my homework turned in on time. And then you turn that assignment in, and then your next goal is, I'm going to pass the quiz, those types of things. So you want to take little baby steps, and by taking baby steps, then you move on to the next thing, and that makes the pathways happen. Adopting a growth mindset is kind of what I just talked about with the micro steps. You want to understand that once you accomplish something, you're going to check it off the list and move on to the next thing, and be really open to growth, to learning new things, to realizing that, oh, well, gosh, I always thought it was this way, but I guess I need to look at it this way as well, and have this growth mindset. Practicing mindfulness. We talk a lot about that in healthcare, nursing, and allied health. And mindfulness basically means to an awareness of yourself, awareness of your experience, of where you are, and how other people are, like how you present yourself, and just being like self-awareness, right? Practicing mindfulness, because the way I speak to you, I think I'm, being personable and professional, but that may not be how you're perceiving me. And I need to look at your body language and how you're reacting to me in order for us to have a conversation. We just need to be mindful of ourselves, self-awareness. Carefully select your circle of influence. So that means that what happens is, if you hang out with the same people all the time, then you will become very similar to those people. That can be a good thing. But if they're doing things that you aren't things that you like to do, then you may want to look at hanging out with different people or other people, because that can certainly help your pathways and your growth, and people introducing new opportunities for you. Prioritizing an exercise routine. I do not do this one well at all. However, exercise is a great way to promote neuronal growth. So anything that you can do in a routine type of way would be a good thing for you. The next one, this is what I really need to work on. Stop procrastinating. There was, in the article, they talked about if something comes up, think about it for 4 seconds and then do it instead of putting things off. And I thought that was really great because I actually did that this morning. I thought, oh, I'll do that later. I'm like, oh, no, I'm just going to do it now and get it over with. And it really felt good. So if you stop procrastinating, you're not stuck someplace. You're continuing to do the movement, to have the thoughts, the feelings, and you are moving ahead. You have that growth mindset, and it moves you further in your learning. And then raise your standards. In the Nursing and Allied Health program, we all have high standards of where you will be once you graduate. Those are our program learning outcomes. And we need you to do that as well. You can't necessarily stay in the same direction that you were going. Now you're going to be a healthcare professional. So we want you to raise your standards, try new things. Try a different way of studying, try a new experience, and that again will promote the growth of the neural networks. An interesting thing that I saw, the pursuit of happiness, which is what this picture shows us, is that meditation is very, very helpful in expanding the neural networks. So the monks can spend more than 10,000 hours of their lives in meditation. I'm not one that meditates very often, if at all. However, they did a comparison between monks and students. I don't know, college, high school, I don't know which students. However, the monks were actually, could generate feelings of compassion through the meditation. Activity in the prefrontal cortex was able to swamp activity in the right prefrontal cortex. So it sort of overtook it and associated it with happiness, which I think is really interesting because there was no difference between the right and left prefrontal cortex with the students because they didn't really meditate all that much. So I think it's really interesting that emotions, what they're saying, their hypothesis is that emotions, moods, states are trainable mental skills. I'm not saying that that's the only thing that's going to deal with that. But I thought it was a really interesting idea. So if anybody meditates, I think that would be great. Or if you've ever thought of taking up meditation, I think now would be a good time to do that. So we're going to quickly review mindfulness. We talked about that in the previous slide. And as you work through the rest of this week, this ACE week, we're going to develop some mindfulness activities for you. And as I said, it's a moment-to-moment awareness of your experience without judgment. We really try to suspend judgment in healthcare. And mindfulness practices can often produce benefits. So if you are very mindful, it can help to have a better working memory capacity. You reduce your stress and anxiety. It can boost your working memory, increases your ability to learn and pay attention by being aware, self-aware, and you're aware of your experience. You have a decrease in emotional reactivity. We're going to talk about that when we talk about bioreactions. And so you can take a deep breath and kind of chill out. It also can enhance your self-insight, morality, intuition, and fear control. One of the other things that we do very often in nursing and allied health is have students write reflections to look at this, to have some self-insight. Why did you do what you did? What was the situation? Why did you feel this way? If you felt differently, could you have done this or that type of thing? So a lot of nursing and allied health is that insight. We look at ethics, morality, law, intuition, those types of things, and fear. As a new student, there are going to be experiences that you are really scared to do, but you will have a faculty person there with you, or a peer, or somebody there with you, and I would encourage you to take those experiences and learn from them, and that will again help you as you have those experiences over and over again to grow those new pathways. So that's the information about neuroplasticity. What are some take-home concepts that you can take home, or take, I guess you're at home, take to another room in your home, to remember that you can change the function and structure of your brain by behavior. You can grow neurons all the time. Your adult brain is not fixed wiring. There's adult learning theories, and we can take your experiences and add new ones, and you can grow new pathways. And you can change the function and structure of your brain by just thinking about things like the meditation, studying certain things, repetition of things. So hopefully that has provided some new insights and some new information for you. And we will continue to refer to neuroplasticity this week as well as in your program courses. So I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Thank you.